So first we have, first speaker of the day will be Mark McCombs. Mark is a former attorney who worked as SAFER Foundation's public policy analyst and a member of its lobbying team. Before being impacted by incarceration, Mark had a 26-year career in government relations, local government economic development, and public finance law. He served as the government affairs group chair and vice chair of two major law firms where he lobbied for energy and gaming interests, counseled U.S. Senator Carol Moseley Braun, and led teams which developed over 25 million square feet under roof and issued $2.5 billion in public financing. Mark's earlier work as a trial lawyer included participation in the Chicago Consul Wars litigation. Mark has a Bachelor's of Science, magna cum laude, in political science and international relations from American University and a doctorate from Northwestern University. He has published articles on such diverse topics as tax incrimination financing, AIDS and employment and testimonial privileges, and frequently lectured at the Illinois Institute for Continuing Legal Education classes. Mark is also a classically trained chef who cooked professionally for 5 years and still occasionally does. So we're looking forward to hearing from Mark. Our second speaker will be Dawn Heid. Dawn Heid is the CEO of Rethink Electric. She joined Rethink in 2018 with a background in finance and the construction industry. For the past 10 years, she has been helping to improve profitability of service industry businesses. After joining Rethink, she focused her energy on the growth of the company needed to capitalize on a strong solar market. Dawn continually works to harness talent and focus resources on creating a solid organization that is fiscally responsible, understands the value of their educated and diverse workforce, and develops strong relationships with Rethink's partners. I also want to mention that Dawn serves on the ISEA Board of Directors, and we appreciate all of her hard work there as well. And then our final speaker will be Linda Larsen. Linda Larsen is helping the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity launch new workforce and contractor programs to equitably grow the clean energy workforce. She works at the University of Illinois Smart Energy Design Assistance Center, where she is the Education and Communications Program Director. Linda is also a member of the Education Justice Project's Reentry Guide Initiative, where she helps produce and distribute resources for people leaving prison. So I think you can all see that we have the right team with us for this education event today. And I'm going to hand the reins to Mark so he can show his screen.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm Mark McCombs. I'm with SAFER Foundation, and I should mention that I am in the process of, as we're putting this together, transitioning out of SAFER, or I still may be staying as a consultant, and I'm the new executive director of Colby House, the prison ministry for the Catholic Archdiocese of Chicago, where I'm coming to you from today, conveniently located a couple blocks from Cook County Jail. So let's start with a little quiz here. How many Americans have a criminal record? Is it 50%, 40%, or 30%? If you said 50%, you are wrong. 50% is actually the unemployment rate for persons with criminal records. If you said 40%, you'd be wrong. That is the percentage of Illinois adults who have a criminal record. 33% is actually the percentage of Americans who have a criminal record. More than 78 million Americans have criminal records. This is, as I said, about a third of the entire U.S. population. In Illinois, over 4 million adults have an arrest or a criminal record. Employers who refuse to hire these individuals are missing an opportunity to hire talented people who, according to studies, are reliable, are amongst the most loyal employees that you'll find, and who are going to make your business financially better. What happens when we don't hire individuals with a criminal record? In Illinois, the 3-year recidivism rate is approximately 39%. That means that within 3 years, almost 4 out of every 10 people who have been incarcerated will be reincarcerated. And the state's own projections show that that recidivism rate is not going to decrease for at least the next 2 fiscal years. The cost of that recidivism to the state of Illinois is huge. Each time somebody recidivates, each time they've been in prison and go back, it costs the state approximately $151,000. The total for the 5-year period ending this year, according to the state's own projections, is over $13 billion. Imagine what we could do with that kind of money, with that kind of savings. The cost to Illinois communities is even higher. And you see some of the statistics that are on the screen here. I'm not going to go over all of them, but the one that's most telling to me is that most individuals who have been in prison in Illinois, when they're released, and realize 90% of people who are in prison are going to be released. It's a very small percentage of people who never come home. Most of them are coming home to one of 6 Chicago neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods reflect 10% of the city's population, but 25% of its violent crimes and 32% of its murders. So there's a huge, huge correlation that we see between recidivism and violence in our communities. The most effective means of resolving this is to make people, returning residents who are coming from prison, successful and healthy so that they have what they need to be able to thrive. And the most effective means of making them successful and healthy we've seen is by addressing the social determinants that cause them to become justice involved in the first place. Most individuals who became justice involved didn't have much of a first chance, let alone much of a second chance. And they need things like employment, housing, educational opportunities, access to behavioral health, primary care services. The bottom line is if we make healthy people, we're going to make healthy communities. And when we make one community healthy, we move towards making all communities healthy in the state. As we've seen, violence really does not respect any kind of borders. And this is especially true for returning residents employment needs. Prison Policy Initiative has found that formerly incarcerated people need stable jobs for the same reason as everyone else, to support themselves and their loved ones, pursue their life goals, and strengthen their communities. When they can't find ways to fulfill those needs legitimately, they're going to find it illegitimately. On the other hand, numerous studies have shown that unemployment is one of the top social determinants for recidivism. Unfortunately, pre-employment background checks reduce a returning residents' chances for employment by at least 50%. And as a result, we have the unemployment figures that you see here. The most telling one that I always think of is that one in the middle, that the unemployment rate for returning residents is higher now than the entire national rate during the Great Depression. So it leads ultimately to the question of why don't employers hire returning residents? And the answer is in a number of unsupported myths, the first of which is that we hear over and over again that second chance employees are too much of a threat to work in a residential or business setting. The reality is that returning residents are much less of a threat to a business, or much less of a threat to society in general, if they're employed. Returning residents are actually a lot less likely to engage in criminal behavior when they are employed. Recidivism rates drop by anywhere from about 50 to 62% for returning residents who have full-time employment. And one study has actually found that recidivism will drop to single digits for individuals who have full-time employment. Second myth, second chance employees will be less reliable than their counterparts. The reality, again, is that second chance employers have more job loyalty because of the fact that they have less options, fewer options for employment, and they lead to higher retention rates and cost savings. Northwestern University has found employees with criminal records have much longer tenure and are less likely to quit their jobs voluntarily than other employees. Society for Human Resource Management, 72% of HR professionals, 68% of business leaders say retention rate for second chance employees was as good as better than others. Kroger, 93% retention rate for second chance employees in 18 months. Hopkins, lower turnover for under a 5-year study of 500 second chance employees during the first 40 months. Total wine and liquor, 12%, 12.2% lower turnover. ERI, again, 25 to 11% lower turnover. The biggest number is the cost savings. These higher retention rates allowed employers to avoid the $3,000 to $8,000 cost that you incur every time an employee separates from an employer. Third myth, second chance employees will be less productive than their counterparts. And again, experience and studies are showing otherwise. The Society for Human Resource Management, 85% of human resource professionals say that second chance employees perform as good or better than their counterparts and have a better chance of promotion, as good or better chance of promotion than their counterparts. Second Chance Business Coalition, 82% of managers, 67% of HR professionals report that they value that the value that second chance employees bring to their organizations is as high or higher than those of their counterparts. The other thing is second chance employees bring diversity to your workforce. Since they are more likely to be Black or Latinos, Blacks or Latinos are 6 and 3 times more likely to be incarcerated than whites. They're going to bring greater diversity. Diverse companies are 33% more likely to outperform their competitors. Companies lacking in diversity are 29% more likely to underperform on profitability as compared to their competitors. Last myth we're going to talk about is the myth that businesses will lose business or lose employees if they hire second chance employees. Again, the data is otherwise. The support for second chance hiring is not surprising because at this point, about 50% of people in the United States know or have a relationship or family relationship or otherwise with an adult who was formerly incarcerated. Support for Americans supporting second chance hiring is approximately 8%. And as you can see, that support is pretty much across the board. By a margin of nearly 4 to 1, Americans say they were more likely to reelect their member of Congress if that person voted for second chance hiring. 58% of employees say that they will consider a company's social commitments when deciding when to work for it. 51% won't work for an employer that doesn't have a strong corporate social responsibility program. Those percentages, and this is something else that I thought was very telling, those percentages go way up for millennials who currently make up half of the current workforce. 79%, you see there, consider a company's social commitments when deciding whether to work for that company. 76% will not work for a company without strong social commitments, and those millennials also extend that commitment to their buying power. 91% say they would switch brands from one to another that's associated with a strong social commitment. So these are just very quickly some of the reasons that we think it's in employers' best interest to consider hiring second chance citizens. And I can't state enough that you're going to wind up getting people who are going to be extraordinarily loyal, extraordinarily committed, if for no other reason than the fact that they've experienced tremendous burdens in terms of finding employment and having doors closed on them. And when someone does give them a chance, they are extremely appreciative of it. And you're going to get someone who's going to show that appreciation in terms of greater loyalty, greater retention, and greater productivity. So thank you all for being here. And I think I'm turning it over to, I'm sorry,
Yeah, thanks. No, you're perfect, Mark. Mark, yeah, it's lovely. Thank you so much. Yes, and just thinking about employee loyalty and staff loyalty, particularly in this day and age where there's a lot of job hopping, you've really made a really great case that this population is well deserved of an opportunity, but also that the value they will add back to the company who takes that chance is palatable. It's noticeable. So thank you so much. And as everybody knows, we are recording this webinar, so you'll have a chance to hear Mark's words of wisdom again and again if you so choose. So next up is Dawn Heid. Dawn is the CEO of Rethink Electric, and she's going to relay her experience of Rethink's hiring out of this population. So Dawn, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here as well. Get started. So, yes, Rethink Electric. I've been with Rethink Electric about 8 years now. And my original role was VP of Finance and HR. So for all you HR professionals out there, I was in your shoes. It was my job basically to come up with our hiring practices and our policies when I first joined the company. So all that I'm sharing with you today is kind of the foundation of what we built here at Rethink Electric. And I was kind of excited for this opportunity because I hadn't really sat down and thought about the culmination and the summary of what we've built here. And when I did, it was like, it was a very rewarding experience to kind of take a step back and look at where we were then and where we are now based on these hiring practices. So I'm happy and excited to share with you a little bit of what I learned along the way, actually, implementing these types of hiring policies. All right. All right, so how did it start? So like Mark mentioned in his presentation, a lot of times these types of hiring policies start from a lack of labor available to us, right? So in the solar industry, most of us know that, it started here several years ago and there wasn't a base of employees that necessarily knew how to build solar. We were all competing for labor at the same point in time. And I quickly realized that the available labor was far short of what our customers needed for us to have to build the projects in this new market. Again, it was like a new frontier, a new type of industry, and there just was rapid competition. For those of you who were here in the early days, you remember, employees jumping ship every other month for 50 cents more an hour and things like that. It was kind of the Wild West of hiring at that point in time. So we decided that, we needed to think outside the box to be able to meet the needs of our customers. That's where I started developing some of these policies from. So we began researching hiring, and lo and behold, came to find out there are many, many, many local and state programs out there related to workforce development, returning citizens, pre-apprenticeship programs, training programs. We weren't the first to encounter short labor in the solar market and labor needs of growing companies. And there's quite a few programs out there that already laid the foundation for all this. Mark mentioned being part of the Safer Foundation organization, and that is actually one of the places we hired from, including a lot of other ones that most of you probably know too, like Chicago Urban League, HICEA, OAI, and others and stuff, right? So there are many, many programs out there. They're pretty easy to find information on. Many of them are happy to walk you through the process and connect you with others. We worked with Grid quite a bit too, and they were able to connect us with many, many resources. Same with the state of Illinois. There's always a wealth of people to help connect you to the resources that you need. All right, the initial hire, kind of things that we learned along the way in the first hire. I'd say the biggest lesson learned was the need for looking at the transition for the employee, right? So, and I'm sure, a more typical hire off of Indeed or something like that, it's not necessarily a thought process that you need to have with your HR team, but we found that, our learning experience with our initial hire was that support for that initial transition led to better results for our new hires that were coming out of various programs. It also allowed us to kind of better problem solve and find good solutions that were beneficial to other future hires no matter where they came from. So what kind of support did we end up looking at? Transportation challenges is one that comes up quite often, to be honest with you. We have provided bus tickets and train tickets and things like that for the first couple weeks to get people started. Advanced scheduling of work is sometimes needed. They have sometimes childcare things to work around, or commitments with, various training programs that they're coming out of, or things like that. So just having a set schedule for them in advance has helped. Sometimes we have to be flexible with their scheduling if things pop up that they need to attend for whatever reason. It just seems like a simple one, but weekly paychecks has been a very big benefit for us for bringing in hires out of these groups, because again, many of them are coming from places where they didn't have income or very limited income. So getting that initial payments right away and on a quick and regular basis allowed them to have the funds that they needed to maybe purchase a car or put down, a deposit on a place for rent or things like that. We also made sure that we were providing safety gear because a lot of, again, when you're trying to put food on the table first, it's not always important to you to think about putting safety gear on to keep yourself safe. So as a company, we tried to make sure that we were providing things that we felt were necessary for them. And we also had a tool purchase program. Basically, we provided the tools ahead of time, and then a certain number of weeks into the program, they would, we could stipend or take payments from their paychecks to pay us back and things like that. So they had the gear that they needed to do the job. And we also offer workwear stipends. That's a very popular program with all of our hires, to be able to buy boots or things like that that they need for the job sites, right? All right, communication is another big area that we focused on. And, I know there's areas of legality that we all have to be careful of in what we discuss, but we've found over the years just really trying to build a rapport with our hires from various programs. And again, just trying to make them understand that we're not here to judge them. We're just trying to be honest and direct and work together and learn about any accommodations that they might need for the transition or later on. So we haven't found really that there's been a lot of issues on communication. In fact, it's usually the other way around. Most of our hires have been happy to open up about things that they need help with or ways that they need support, or and it's been a very good two-way street in the communication, but it's an important aspect of it to be aware of. All right, benefits discovered along the way. So similar to Mark, what he mentioned earlier, loyalty has been a clear benefit along the way. I think we have all but one of our hires that came out of all those programs that we've hired out of, and we've hired, I don't know, more than 40 employees from various programs. So our loyalty has been, extremely high, and our retention rates have been extremely high from hiring these various populations. We have also noticed a trait of discipline and time management has been a skill set that we've noticed hiring from these groups. And more importantly, though, too, I think a sense of community has been developed with this hiring process. So we have many, many referrals that come from our initial hires. So, let's say we hired 4 out of various programs in first, and most have brought on 2, 3, or 4 other people along the way. And they are there to help each other out. It becomes a place that they all feel welcome, and they know that you've hired from various programs. They know that you're there to support, and it really becomes a community environment. And then, believe it or not, we started to see some really great benefits within that sense of community. So like, we'd have new hires that came on board that didn't have transportation, and we'd have other hires that had gone through that before, and they offered to drive and pick them up for the first 3 weeks and things like that. So it kind of like became this whole helpful community because they came from similar backgrounds or, had difficult starts to their careers or whatnot. And so, the biggest benefit I've seen so far is just how much, the teams all help each other out. Things we keep in mind, number one, we still screen for cultural fit and other types of questions like that, right? Like, I'm not saying that every candidate you're going to come across is best for your team. We do still try to make sure that it's the right fit for the right job and team that we're trying to add to. Like I said before earlier, we encourage an open dialogue with a new hire. They often have many questions on both sides of this agreement. So encouraging them to voice their questions, opinions, thoughts, processes along the way. And number 3, I found this was kind of our second layer after we started hiring out of various programs. I quickly realized that the hiring was just step 1. And to really be successful for these candidates, we needed to provide a more robust on-the-job training program, which is where our Department of Labor registered apprenticeship program came from. So we decided to take it like one step further, right? And it's not just getting them the job. It's getting them the job, but it's also then giving them lifelong skills that they're going to be able to take with them, whether they stay with us or go elsewhere, right? So we're taking people and training them all the way into being a journeyman electrician. It's a 5-year program, but when they're done, they have a certification that they can use anywhere, right? So that's the additional layer that I think has really boosted the overall program for us. Social responsibility, I think we kind of mentioned a little bit this earlier, but I have a lot of beliefs in this area that businesses in America really are the front lines of all this public policy. It's great that legislators, put language into CEJA that we should hire, diversely and put in percentages that we should do and all that sort of thing. But really it comes down to business owners and business leaders making those decisions and enacting that legislation. So I'm here to say that Rethink Electric has done it successfully, and there's no reason that you and your team can't do the same thing. And at the end of the day, it feels pretty good to be socially responsible. I walk around the organization, I know their stories, I see where they are now from where they were at the beginning. Many of them have bought homes, created families, and so on and so forth. And so the social responsibility that Rethink is doing and providing, it really does feel great at the end of it. Biggest takeaway. So this is where I kind of really took some time to ponder, what has really been the effect of all of these policies that we created. And I was kind of shocked at the totality when I looked back at it. But it really was a snowball effect that ended up being the heart of our company, right? Like it started off as how to solve a labor shortage, and it turned into the cultural framework of our organization. So yeah, it's been where we took one of our greatest challenges, and now it's kind of one of those things that's our greatest strength, and it's one of the things that Rethink has kind of become known for. Our customers love it, our employees love it, our leadership loves it, and now it's really become the fabric of our organization. So I would say don't be shy of hiring and creating these types of hiring policies. And once you start to embrace it more fully, you'll see that it does snowball into a very positive framework for your organization. So those are my takeaways from our experience at Rethink Electric. And, you know, if you ever have more specific questions, you ever want to, you know, reach out to me. I know Leslie has my information and things like that. I'm always happy to talk about this topic because I've been proud of the success that we've had here. And I think it's a good example for a lot of people to work with. So thank you for the time today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dawn. I'm a little teary just listening to you. It's really, really exciting. You should be proud of it, and I am proud of you too. It's a wonderful example for our industry of problem solving in a creative way prior to this all being mandated. So what a wonderful example. So far we've heard today, breaking down the myths of hiring returning citizens, that this is a very viable population to hire out of, and then the success story of Rethink in actually doing so. So I think things are building well. I do want to remind folks that you can put any questions that you have in the chat as you think of them, but we will also unmute at the end of the last speaker so we can have perhaps a little bit of a give and take here. So our third presenter today is Linda Larsen. And if you are involved in workforce development for clean energy in the state at all, you certainly have heard of Linda and seen her name all over everything. So Linda is now going to take us through what the state is doing to support the hiring of returning residents. And if you read her bio in the registration, or you heard me read it earlier, you will know that Linda has been highly involved in advancing this population and opportunities for returning residents for quite a while. And so she's certainly the right person in the seat to be leading the state's efforts. So Linda, why don't you take it away?
Thank you very much, Leslie, for inviting me to participate in a webinar focused on hiring returning residents. And this is something that Leslie mentioned I'm really passionate about. I've worked with returning residents in several positions that I've had, and can echo what both Dawn and Mark have said about the value that they can bring to companies. What I'll be talking about today is how the CEJA workforce programs that are going to be launched in just a few short months, how they're going to be training returning residents, and then what you can do as employers in hiring people from these workforce programs. So I always start with just a very brief overview of CEJA, and I know this crowd is looking at the list of people who are here. I know many of you were involved in drafting this legislation or very involved in the implementation, and I thank you all for your efforts. CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, is a comprehensive energy legislation that centers equity and puts Illinois on track to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2050. We're going to be focusing today on that orange piece of the pie, equitable workforce and business development, but looking at the other pieces, just want to note that we as a state, we're working towards increasing renewable energy, creating energy access and solar for all, supporting fossil fuel workers, electrifying our transportation, creating carbon-free power, and making homes and buildings more energy efficient. Some of CEJA's main goals. CEJA aims to help the state reach 40% renewable energy by 2030. That's coming right up, 50% by 2040, and 100% renewable energy by 2050. We're working towards achieving a carbon-free power grid by 2045, closing all fossil fuel power plants, and the solar industry is certainly part of that transition to renewable energy. And then finally, we need to equitably grow the clean energy workforce to meet the demand for clean energy technologies and services. So want to highlight a little bit the equitable workforce component of CEJA, Illinois, and the United States in general is investing a huge amount of money in clean energy sources, electric vehicles, and energy efficiency to address climate change. And we absolutely need to expand the clean energy workforce to do the work. Some groups and some communities, including returning residents, the focus of today's webinar, they have suffered, historically, they've suffered more from environmental impacts and community disinvestment. And then on the other hand, some groups have benefited more from clean energy investments. So the goal of CEJA is really to make sure that the benefits of clean energy investments and good paying clean energy jobs are distributed equitably. There's 3 workforce programs that I'm going to be talking a little bit about today that are serving returning residents. There's the Clean Jobs Workforce Network program, the Climate Works Pre-Apprenticeship program, and then the Returning Resident Clean Jobs Training program. People often, when they look at this, they think only the Returning Resident program is going to be serving that particular population, but all 3 of these programs will be serving returning residents, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. The goal of these programs is to place people in apprenticeships and jobs. The clean energy employers who hire them will then be able to increase their capacity to work on clean energy projects that are funded by CEJA and other state and national funding sources. So just a brief overview of the 3 programs here. The Clean Jobs Workforce Network program is the one that people think of and know are familiar with the most. This I often refer to as the Workforce Hub program. The goal is to prepare people for good paying entry-level clean energy jobs. It'll consist of clean jobs training, including some clean energy and construction basics, some essential employability skills, and then some job-specific training. There's a few options that the hubs will have the opportunity to choose from, including solar PV installation and other jobs in the solar industry. This program will be provided in at least 13 hubs throughout the state. And who's going to be able to participate? Eligibility, people who live in eligible geographic areas can participate, as well as people who have barriers to employment, including returning residents. It'll be delivered by community-based organizations and partners. And if you've been paying attention to the announcements going out from DCEO, we did release the Notice of Funding Opportunity for this program in the summer. And the first round of reviews is in progress, and we hope to be able to announce awardees this fall, and the programs will begin training people in the winter. So we're at an exciting time where things are moving. We're excited to get this program started. The pre-apprenticeship program is similar. the main difference between this program and the workforce hubs is that the goal is really to prepare people for apprenticeship placement. So getting them to the point where they can apply for and succeed in apprenticeship programs in construction and the building trades, with a focus again on clean energy jobs. The training is focused on construction basics with a clean energy focus, and it will be delivered in 3 centers throughout the state. Eligible participants, same as the previous program, people who live in eligible geographic areas, as well as people who have barriers to employment, including returning residents. It'll be delivered by community-based organizations and partners. And again, we're on the cusp of announcing awardees. We've been reviewing, the team at DCEO has been reviewing applications, and they're in grant negotiations. We're working to start these programs again this winter. And then finally, the third CEJA workforce program is the Returning Resident Clean Jobs Training Program. It's very similar to the workforce hubs. The main difference is that this program will be offered inside Illinois Department of Corrections facilities, also delivered by community-based organizations and partners. And we're working on developing a program design that will support the returning residents while they are in training in IDOC facilities, as well as when they get out and transition into the workforce. So we're excited to release this funding opportunity this fall. It's taking a little bit longer as we coordinate our efforts with the Illinois Department of Corrections, but this will be coming soon. So where will these workforce programs be located? The workforce hubs are the locations for the workforce hubs. The general locations are outlined in the legislation. You can see the 13 hubs listed here. The Climate Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program will be delivered in 3 regional centers. The exact locations are not determined yet, but will be announced when we select the awardees. And then the Returning Resident Program, the Department of Corrections has selected a few facilities where they are willing to offer the training, and grantees will propose to offer training at one of those facilities. So we talked a little bit about who the programs will serve. Geographic eligibility depends on 2 factors. Do you live in an environmental justice or in an R3 community? These are communities that have been impacted by pollution, by economic disinvestment, by incarceration, by low employment rates. So again, these are the target communities in the legislation, but anyone who is eligible to participate in the programs, regardless of where they live, if they've faced other barriers to employment, including if they are formerly incarcerated, if they're current or former members of the foster care system, and if they are displaced energy workers. And here, this map, it comes from the Equity Investment Eligible Community Map. When we share the slides out, you can take a look at this. These are just 3 of the hub locations, so you can see the geographic areas within those locations where people would be eligible to participate. We're really trying to build workforce programs that are equity focused and that can best serve the populations that are outlined in the legislation. So what does this look like? This looks like proactive recruitment of equity-focused populations. This will include, we're looking for grantees who have connections to reentry organizations, to returning resident populations who can recruit from those organizations. Another central component of the workforce programs is to provide robust wraparound supports to eliminate or reduce barriers. So what does this look like? It looks like providing funding for transportation, for childcare, for mental and physical health needs, for getting your driver's license, for accessing tools and work clothing. It can incorporate a number of wraparound supports. We are we'll be working with grantees to develop a program culture that empowers for resilience and success, that has a culture of collaboration and belonging. And the programs will also offer robust transition services after hire. So Dawn was talking a little bit about what her company does to support returning residents after hire. And the training programs will also be providing support, including wraparound supports after hire, to help with retention, help with employee retention and success. And then finally, we'll be setting goals, measuring outcomes, and adjusting depending on what we learn. We want to make sure that we collect good data on how our programs are serving returning residents and how we can improve. I don't need to cover much of this because I think Mark and Dawn did it so well, but I do want to put out a few thoughts on why hire returning residents and others from the CEJA workforce programs. One thing that Dawn and Mark didn't mention, but that may be very much on your mind, is the minimum equity standards. These are standards for the solar energy industry. If you are participating in Illinois Shines or the state's competitive procurement processes, you know that you have to have a certain percentage of your workforce be equity eligible persons. And that percentage is going to be increasing year by year. So if you're looking for ways to meet the minimum equity standards, one way to do that is by hiring people from the CEJA workforce programs. People who participate in these workforce programs are automatically considered equity eligible persons and can help you meet that requirement. We hope that you'll also consider hiring from these workforce programs because we're working hard to make the programs meet your skill and qualification needs. So the programs, the hubs offer will be providing NABCEP PV associate training. They'll be providing job readiness training and skills, clean energy and construction basics to help your employees have the skills they need to succeed. As Mark and Dawn noted, this is a great opportunity for you to make good on diversity and inclusion goals. And want to also emphasize what they've both mentioned, that people who've been incarcerated bring strengths that others may not have. I've worked with several people who've been incarcerated in the organizations where I work, and they have a resilience that many of us don't have. They're committed, loyal employees, and often they have connections to diverse communities that the rest of us may not have. So they can help expand your business and connect to customers in ways that you may not be able to otherwise. And then, as Dawn put it so beautifully, hiring returning residents is going to strengthen our communities too. We have done a fair amount of listening. If you've been on some of our webinars, we held some listening sessions, including specific listening sessions regarding the returning resident program. And we listened to employers share some of their concerns about hiring this particular population. And as we've been working to design the CEJA programs, we are considering ways that the programs can address some of these concerns. And Dawn as well talked about how her company addresses the concerns. And certainly it's the responsibility of employers to create inclusive environments for returning residents. But I want to emphasize here that the CEJA programs are here to help as well, and that we are working to address these concerns. So I heard a lot from employers. It's too big of a risk. It's a legal liability. My response has often been to that, consider adopting an asset rather than a risk mindset. What are the assets that returning residents can bring to your organization? The CEJA programs will be helping employers evaluate and address risk, the legal liability, and connect employers to programs like the federal bonding program to kind of mitigate some of the risk. And we're working on learning a little bit more about those programs now and helping the programs address that. One thing that we hear a lot is, I don't think my customers or other employees would react well if I hired them. As Mark showed in his presentation, the public is largely behind efforts, second chance hiring efforts. So I think that fear is in many ways unfounded. But the CEJA programs are also going to be providing guidance for creating second chance friendly work environments and for addressing customer concerns. So one of the requirements of the returning resident program is to develop an employer handbook, a handbook that provides guidance and policy advice for employers who are going to be hiring returning residents. We also hear local, state, or federal regulations make it impossible or very difficult to hire returning residents. Again, we're working to identify and address those issues and provide legal and policy guidance for employers, which will include connecting them to federal bonding programs. Another concern I've heard a lot from employers was not having reliable transportation to and from work. So the CEJA programs are providing robust wraparound supports, and those supports can continue after hire as needed. So if the people you hire from the CEJA program still need support with transportation or getting their driver's license, we can continue to support them for up to 1 year in addressing those needs. And then finally, I don't have the time or ability to support people with lots of needs. We're hoping that the CEJA programs will provide guidelines and support to help employers create second chance friendly workplaces. Again, we are working to outline robust transition services to help you with the support that you provide to new employees, including mentorships to help with retention. So in thinking ahead, these programs aren't up and running yet, but they will be in the winter. And we're hoping that the solar industry will be ready and excited to hire returning residents and other program graduates from these programs. So how can you get involved, and how can you get involved now? I've delivered many of these webinars, and whenever I engage with employers, I encourage them to connect with the people who are applying for these workforce programs. The workforce programs are only as successful as their connections to employers. We hope you will consider getting involved in the training programs. One important way you can get involved is to offer work-based learning opportunities, class visits, field trips, opportunities to meet the people in the training program, to get to know them so you know who you want to hire when they graduate. There are steps you can take now to be prepared to hire workforce program graduates, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And then finally, we hope you'll reach out to us, communicate your needs, your concerns, as well as your successes. So it was lovely to hear Dawn's story of success in hiring returning residents. We want to understand your concerns, your needs, your successes, so that we can create program structures that will support you and that will enable the success of the returning resident participants. So a few ideas on what you can do now, what you can be thinking about now as you prepare to hire returning residents from the CEJA programs. One important thing to do is review your policies and your hiring practices and your applications. Do you require a background check, for instance? Are you following Illinois law in banning the box from your application? What are your restrictions for hiring returning residents, and do they need to be updated? That's something that you could look at and consider now. You might want to revisit recruitment strategies and messaging to proactively engage returning residents. What do your promotion materials look like? Are they inclusive? Do you use people first language, avoiding words like convict or ex-felon to center people's humanity in your language? Do you have relationships with organizations like Safer Foundation and others who have connections to returning resident populations that you can recruit from? One thing you might consider doing as you're preparing is getting some coaching or training for the staff who will be working with or supervising returning resident new hires. There's a lot we can learn to create a more supportive and inclusive environment for everyone, but especially returning resident populations. You can start seeking guidance from returning residents themselves and employers who have hired returning residents like Don. Learning from them, learning about their needs, learning about the challenges that they may face is a great way to prepare to create an inclusive work environment. And then finally, identify practices your business can adopt to support returning resident new hires through that transition period, especially, but throughout their time with your organization. I thought Don had a lot of really excellent advice on that front, and certainly worth considering as you wait for the programs to get started and prepare to hire people. I will note from personal experience, the organization I work with at the University of Illinois has hired several returning residents, and the Education Justice Project as well. We've hired returning residents for outreach and for research, for community engagement, and I have loved my experience working with this particular population. They have a lot to bring to the table. I acknowledge that there are challenges and that supporting people may take a little bit of work. For instance, the people that we hired had been incarcerated for a long period of time and needed some help with technology. It was hard for them to join Zoom meetings and access files and know how to use our document sharing systems. So we had to spend a little bit more time training them. There may be other barriers that they face or challenges that they face that need to be addressed. But what we found is that the benefits that they bring, the connections, the strong, the skills that they have has certainly outweighed some of the challenges that have been part of that transition process. Another thing your company can do to prepare for the CEJA workforce programs, if you haven't done this already, you can register your company on the Energy Equity portal. This will be the place where you can connect to job seekers. You can register as a clean energy company and post jobs on this website, and then job seekers from the CEJA programs, once they're up and running, will be able to connect to employers, connect to you through this website. So we're hoping this will be a good place for you to recruit participants and to find out who's received the training that you're looking to hire for. And then finally, reach out. This email, ceo.ceja@illinois.gov, is the best way to reach our team. We'll get back to you with questions. We have a robust frequently asked questions page that I can share with you as well, that answers a lot of questions about the CEJA workforce programs, including how the programs are going to be serving returning residents. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you to serve this population. Thanks.
That was wonderful. Thanks so much, Linda, for all of your words of wisdom. I wanted to mention when I was listening to your presentation that it has been just great working with you and your team on and the listening. Yes, you've had listening sessions. You've listened to so many people and so many varying what seemed at the time different needs, but I can see how it's all coming together and we're all now rowing in the correct direction. So we really appreciate all of your efforts in making this magic happen. So, and looking forward to things getting kicked off too. Let's get those programs up and running and see what we can do with them. I often think that the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act is really a heroic effort. And in checking with other state trade associations across the country as to what they have for their hiring opportunities, there really isn't anything like this across the country. And so I'm really hopeful that CEJA will be an example to other states as to what they can do to ensure not only a strong workforce, because that's certainly a big consideration for clean energy across the country, but also ensuring that we are leaders in having a diverse workforce here in the state. Let's see here. So questions, comments. Nicola, I think we can look, I don't see anything really in the chat, but if people would like to raise their hands, we can start to unmute folks to ask questions. But since I don't see anything yet, I'm going to ask my questions. I came up with a couple while you guys were talking. One, I wanted to see if either Linda or maybe Mark or maybe Dawn, if she has this experience, could talk a little bit more about the federal bonding program and what that opportunity brings to businesses.
Go ahead,
Linda,
Mark.
do you want to do it? Or yeah, the federal bonding, this is a very, I'm finding out that this is a very little known program. The U.S. Department of Labor, and I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to if you didn't. The U.S. Department of Labor has a federal bonding program that provides employers with free fidelity bonding to protect against losses that are caused by any dishonest acts by a justice involved employee. The losses are capped at $5,000. The coverage is limited to the first 6 months after they're hired. But by then, most employers have a pretty good idea that this is going to be, is or is not going to be a good employee. And the survey done by the Department of Labor is that most employers believe that $5,000 cap covers just about anything that is going to run amok in the first 6 months of an employer's tenure. So it's a wonderful program. It's completely free. It's fairly employer friendly and usable. Linda, what's your guys' experience with it?
Yeah, see it kind of as an insurance policy against something going wrong. Not that you will necessarily need it, but it can provide some peace of mind and is good to take advantage of.
That's great. Is that easily found? Would either of you have a link that we could throw in the chat? And if not,
Sure.
We can find that and send that out when we send the follow-up.
Yeah, I can find a quick link. Give me a minute.
You know, I just see one of the participants sent me a direct message saying that they've used it. If somebody wanted to come off mute and just give us a couple of seconds about what your experience has been, I think it'd be very valuable.
maybe sometimes people might not be in a place where they can really talk. Maybe it's loud, but if that person wants to, just raise your hand and we'll find you. While we look for that resource to share, we'll share it in the chat, but we'll also, like I said, send it out with our follow-up so folks can find it easily. I think Nicole has her hand raised and has another question for us. We'll go to that next.
Yes, thank you so much. This was really, really excellent. I was wondering, first of all, Kim Knowles, I recognize your question in the chat about the 3 facilities that IDOC is going to use for the returning residents program. And also, when will the programs be up and running when will the programs be up and running in those 3 facilities? And will those facilities, are they all male facilities, or is it a combination of male and female?
Great question. Right now, IDOC has determined that there are 8 facilities, and I can dig up the list if you're interested, where they are willing to and able to put the training program. And their desire is to get grantees to apply at any of these 8, and then they'll select applicants to deliver in at least 3 of the 8 facilities. They do intend to select one women's facility. So one of the 8 is a women's facility. So definitely a little still up in the air. As far as dates, we are hoping to get the notice of funding opportunity out. I say this all the time, and then it always takes, the administrative process takes longer than I intend. We'll say the fall. This is a little bit more of an administratively complex program working with IDOC, but hoping to get it out in the fall, which would mean, realistically getting the program actually started is going to be in the spring.
Okay, so you said that IDOC determined that there were 8 facilities that they're able to
offer
through.
Potentially offer.
But for right now, they're working with 3, you said?
They will select grantees to deliver the training at 3, maybe more facilities. They didn't want to necessarily limit by geographic area. They wanted grantees to be able to propose training at a number of different facilities, and then they would pick the top grantees at the facility, at any of those 8 facilities. Does that make sense, Nicole? They didn't want to limit it to just 3, knowing that would geographically limit the applicants who would be able to apply.
Okay. And what's your email?
I'll pop it in the chat.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. Linda, I see a related question in the chat. It asks if you could name the facilities. Is that something
Sure.
you'd like to put in the chat as well?
Yeah. Give me a minute.
Yep. No, take your time.
I'll dig it up.
I'll ask while you do that. And again, folks, just raise your hand. We'll unmute you to ask your important questions. But I have another question because I've heard this since the beginning of time, I think, about transportation and people not having thanks, Linda, not having cars. And we know that the solar industry is pretty mobile. We're not going to one place to work every day. So I am curious as to what potential supports the state could give, but I was also wondering if Dawn is still on with us. I'm not sure she is. I know she's flying around, got a lot to do, but if she's still on, hi, Dawn. I was curious as to how you may have handled that. Or what resources you might have found to support people being able to get to the job site. Oh, you're muted. Dawn, you're muted. Yeah.
I was double muted, sorry. yes, to getting people to job sites. We've used a lot of numerous creative methods. We've used bus tickets, train tickets, carpooling, various aspects like that. So it kind of depends on the situation. I'd say the most common methods than the carpooling situation. Like I said, it turned out that a lot of our older hires would help the newer hires coming on board because they'd gone through similar situations. So like I said, it was that positive snowball effect that kind of happened within the company.
That's really helpful. It makes good sense. Linda or Mark, did you have anything else to add to transportation concerns?
You know, that this is one of these areas, just to kind of put a little bit of an underscore under of what Linda said in terms of partnering with a community-based organization. That this is a population that comes with, as we've said, special capabilities, but also, as you've heard, special needs. And you may want to think very seriously about partnering with someone like Safer or one of the other community-based organizations that does this to be able to help you provide the supports. And one of the supports I know that we provide at Safer regularly is getting people bus vouchers so that they can get to work sites, you know, on time and be able to get the work done. But also, you know, you're going to find that folks are going to have parole mandates, and we can help with that. They're going to have therapy needs, and we can help with that. And again, not just to plug Safer, but all of the community-based organizations that serve the returning resident population can be a tremendous help and a great partner for you. So think very seriously about not going it alone, but getting some help, because it's out there and it's free.
Thanks, Mark. I think that all of that is really important. The CEJA workforce programs, as I mentioned before, can help your organization in providing those wraparound supports even after hire. A few others that I want to mention is legal services. So helping with expungement, helping getting your driver's license back. A lot of people have DUIs, may need some help resolving those issues to be able to drive again. A driver's license is required in many of the jobs that you have. So, so we want to help participants be able to get their ID, get their driver's license. Working with community-based organizations is great, and we hope you'll also see the CEJA workforce programs as a resource in meeting those needs.
That's perfect. Let's see here. I think we've exhausted the subject and answered everybody's questions, because I don't see any others. Nicola, is there anybody else that I might be missing that has their hand raised, or I don't see anything in the chat.
See anyone.
Answers. Okay.
I did put
I think this is.
I did put a link to the federal bonding program in the chat, so you can take a look at that. And we will be putting together resources for employers who will be hiring returning residents, working on that. And we'll have that ready when the workforce programs get launched.
That's great. That's great. So I think we have done our job here today. I think that we have made a really wonderful case of hiring the returning residents population. And I expect that the folks on this call today, as well as all the folks who registered but were able to make it, will use this communication as a good resource for them as they're building their own workforce plans moving forward to meet their minimum equity standard requirements and obligations. And I appreciate all of you, just the work that you do day to day to advance this population, and also for taking the time today to educate others on the importance of ensuring that we include returning residents in the Illinois solar energy workforce. So with that, I think I'm going to release everybody. You're going to get 10 minutes back to your day. And this recording will go out in the next day or so. Hopefully we'll get it out tomorrow, and with some of the resources. And For those attendees, please feel free to use ISEA as a resource and to ask any questions, and we can certainly get to our presenters if need be to get their input and their words of wisdom. So thanks everybody for attending, and thanks very much to our presenters today for helping us make the case. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.